I'm going to mostly talk about the PHP SDK, because currently we are in version 2.8, and in 2 weeks we are going to release the version 3, which has a couple of changes that I wanted to mention now. So, for those of you who don't use the SDK, or are just using Amazon Web Services to host your application in Symfony, in Cake PHP, and you never use the SDK, the SDK allows you to interact with the low-level API of Amazon Web Services. So this is a small example on how you use the API, the SDK, first to instantiate a client, and then to start an EC2 instance. Well, not very useful if your application doesn't need to create EC2 instances, but the case that I wanted to show you is applications that are interacting with other services like DynamoDB, S3, and so on. So, best way to install it is through Composer. I think it's pretty straightforward. I assume everyone here knows what is Composer and how to use it. You just require the SDK, so you see in step 2, and then you do the usual require in your application. So the new things in the PHP version 3, so you can already use it. So if you go to GitHub, if you want to pull the version 3, you have to go here to the v3 branch, right? Otherwise, if you do a clone, you are in the master branch and you are going to have the 2.8. So we did a big jump on Guzzle. So version 2.8 was based on Guzzle 3, and it required you to have curl installed. So now we are moving to Guzzle 4, and it's the requirement is to have at least PHP 5.4, right? So there's a lot of performance improvements that not only come from using Guzzle, but we changed a lot of the ways we internally instantiated classes and so on. So roughly you can have something about like 50 to 70% performance increase just by moving to the new SDK. There's a couple of new features that I'm going to show as well. So yeah, a couple of examples on the performance increase. So those are tests on DynamoDB. So it's not testing DynamoDB per se, but it's the API request to DynamoDB. So those are run in an M2 2 extra large instance. And you see that most of the time, regardless you're doing serially or concurrently, this is something that was a bit slow in the previous SDK. Now the performance has increased like more than 50%. So same way to install it. If you want to install it now, you have to change the way you do the require on Composer. So you have to add the flag with the development version, and perhaps if you want to do it with a JSON file, you want to also do it with the minimum requirement as the dev environment, because it's still in dev. So in 2 weeks it's going to be in production. So previously with version 2, you do like this in order to create an EC2 instance. Now when you're going to be in version 3, not a big change. You just have to specify which API version you are going to choose, right? So not a dramatic change, and the rest of your code should be exactly the same. Now you can use new methods, but the SDK version 3 is built for backwards compatibility as well. I'm going to quickly go through some of the new features. So perhaps the most important ones are the asynchronous features. Yesterday there was a talk on React and how you do asynchronous calls and so on with the futures. So it's going to be exactly the same with the new SDK because it's built on React. And the other exciting one is the usage of JMESPath. So for those of you who've been like long enough or been, I don't know, perhaps unfortunate enough to have to work with XSL, JMESPath is slightly the same, right? It allows you to do like XPath queries, but on JSON files. So this is very useful. For example, if you use DynamoDB, DynamoDB now does like Mongo. You can store JSON objects directly into DynamoDB, so you can do requests inside those objects. So. So since we are here and we are a small audience, I'm gonna build a small demo application. So it's a very simple demo app that basically allows you to take a picture and to upload it. So the way we're going to build it is like this, but I'm going to simplify it a little bit. we're going to use beanstalk, since the first session this morning was about beanstalk. So basically what we're going to build is this. So an application that allows you to upload a picture. The metadata of the picture is going to be stored into a table in dynamodb. And the images are going to store it into Amazon S3. And while we upload the image, we're going to create a small thumbnail, and we're going to store it into another bucket, right? So first thing we need is the dynamodb, the Amazon S3 bucket. So just to show you on my console, I already created the buckets. So here I connected to my AWS account. I'm located now in the region in Ireland. So we have 11 regions around the world. So there's 2 in Europe, 1 in Frankfurt and 1 in Ireland. And the buckets that I created here for the demo are those. So I created 2, one called phptour encoded. It's completely empty, there's nothing on it. So this one is going to receive the encoded files. It can be like, for example, let's say, I don't know, video files that we can encode with Amazon Elastic Transcoder. And the original files, I'm going to put them here in the bucket called the phptour-origin. Okay, so you can create all those resources either via the AWS command line interface or via the web interface as I did myself, or directly via a PHP initialization script. It's always a good idea when you build an application that relies on AWS to either have a CloudFormation script that is going to create all the resources for you, or even in PHP. That is, in plain PHP, you can create all the resources because you can manipulate all the API endpoints. So here I'm instantiating a new client for AWS. Here I create a client for S3. And then to create the 2 buckets, it's pretty straightforward, right? So notice here I'm using this method, wait until. So I'm blocking the execution of my script until the bucket is created. It takes a couple of seconds, not even that. But if I want to have like a sequential creation of my resources, I can use this. Okay, now for DynamoDB, basically we're going to do exactly the same. So going back to my console, I already created the table just to prepare this demo, but it's pretty straightforward to create a table on DynamoDB. So here's the table. So perhaps I'm going to recreate one just to show you how to create tables. So you give a name to the table. So this one is going to be called demo2 metadata. And the DynamoDB is a NoSQL database, right? Like Cassandra, MongoDB, and so on. But the only 2 things you have to specify is the index. So in this for this application, I'm using a double index. So it's a hash key and a range key. So I'm going to use the username, right, of the guy who uploaded the picture, and the timestamp. So in the future, I'll be able to do like request by only getting the images of a specific user and sort them by upload time and so on. So for example, you can type like, let's say one field will be user, and another one will be the timestamp. And once you're here, at this stage, we don't need secondary indexes. You only have to provision capacity. So one read capacity unit gives me 1 request per second. So in production, it's definitely not enough, but for test is okay. And here you can use a basic an alarm that is enabled by default. So this is a free alarm that notifies you when you are consuming too much capacity. So again, in this situation, I don't need to do all this. And that's pretty much it. So everything that I've been doing here on the web interface, you can do it also in PHP. The idea is exactly the same as with the S3 buckets. So first you create a client for a DynamoDB here, and then you create the tables. What I have here in the ellipsis is the details, how much provision capacity you want, and so on. But you get the point. That is, It's just a table with different attributes that allow you to describe your table. And again, I do the wait until here to make sure that I don't continue my script until all my resources have been created. Now, the way wait until works is it's kind of lame or straightforward. Basically, it's going to the wait until call is going to poll the AWS endpoint to see if the resource is created, right? So here, if I go back to the dynamodb console, you see that the table is in the creating state. But if I do a refresh, yeah, now it's active. So basically, your PHP code is going to do exactly the same. It's going to do like HTTP queries to wait until the table is shows as active. So this is interesting to do in situations where, for example, you have an application that absolutely requires the database to exist, the buckets to exist, and all the resources to exist before being launched, right? Because imagine you're creating your environment with a database, buckets, and you launch your application. Your application is going to first try to connect to the database, but the database doesn't exist, or the tables don't exist. Well, that's why you want to have those synchronization points. Now, in many situations, you don't need to wait for that. In this example, I can create in parallel the buckets and create in parallel also the tables, right? Especially if I have a lot of resources to create, I can parallelize them. So I can make them asynchronous. So the way you do it with the new SDK is pretty straightforward. So I replace the previous call to the method create table, and I just add the suffix async, and that's it. So this method call is going to directly give me back the handle. So the execution is going to continue, and the SDK is going to asynchronously create the dynamodb table. So you have a result object that is going to allow you to poll for the status, to know when the table has been created or not. Now, with this waiter, either you can do exactly as what we did before with the wait until, that is, you can take the handle and wait for the execution to finish, like when you have multiple parallel threads, right? Or you can chain them with promises, right? So you have 3 different handles. So once the call has been fulfilled, if there's an error and the call has been rejected, or if it's still in progress, so you want to, for example, show a progress bar, how the different features are, or the different resources are created, and so on. The way to chain them is shown in this snippet. Is perhaps not very clear, but the idea is this one, right? So first you do the create table asynchronously, and you do the calls to the then method, which allows you to then do subsequent calls. But those 2 executions are going to be run in parallel, right? So this is something that you couldn't do before with the current version of the SDK, that now you're going to be able to do with the version 3. So it's not only for creating resources. In my application, where, for example, I have to upload 2 images, one is going to be the original image of the user, and another one the thumbnail, I don't have to upload one and then the other. I can upload the 2 in parallel, right? So now that we have the resources created, so we created we have the buckets, the 2 buckets created, we have the dynamodb table created. Now we have to deploy, to create the application and deploy it into Beanstalk. So for those of you who were not in the session this morning, so Beanstalk is what people call a platform as a service environment. So basically you can deploy any kind of web application. You see that the list of languages and combinations of languages and application servers that are supported right now. There's multiple versions also in PHP that are supported. And for this very simple application, the stack that I'm going to use is also, well, pretty lightweight. So obviously I'm using the AWS SDK, which is already included. I'm going to use Silex for the web framework, Twig just for one small HTML template. And I'm going to use the Imagine library to create the thumbnails, right? So to install all this, I'm going to use again Composer. This is the way I'm going to request the different versions of the packages. Not that I prefer some versions rather than others, but I tested them with those. Notice here how I'm calling the latest version of the AWS SDK. So I'm mentioning that I absolutely want the version 3 of the SDK, and here I set as a requirement that as a minimum stability, I want the development branches. So in 2 weeks, you will be able to remove this line, right? Currently, it's still in development, so if you want to absolutely pull this branch, you have to add this to the composer descriptor. Okay, so let me show you the source code. Perhaps it's going to be a bit clear. So this is the application that I'm creating, and actually, since we are going to build everything from scratch, I don't need that. So I mean, there's nothing special in this application. So so here, this is the single PHP script that I'm using. So I'm doing the imports. Here you see in this first section, I'm doing a couple of setups. So first I'm requiring the SDK. I'm going to connect to the region Europe West. So this is Ireland. I'm using the latest version install of the SDK. I'm creating my 2 clients, one for S3 and another one for dynamodb. I add a couple of constants, so those are the 2 buckets that I'm going to use. This is the name of the table, and then I instantiate imaging, right? So the rest is the configuration for Twig. As you can see here, my application is extremely simple. There's only 2 calls that you can make. One is an HTTP GET to the root of the application, which is going to show all the images of the user. And another one, if I call exactly the root of my application with a POST request, it's because I'm uploading an image, right? So I think yesterday the last session was about REST. So I don't know if it's fully REST, but well, you can imagine it like this, right? So here the GET method, extremely simple again. So the only thing that makes it complex is just the try-catch block. But basically what I'm doing is just I'm scanning all the items that I have on my dynamodb table. So you see here the call. So I'm getting an iterator on the scan method. Usually you don't want to do this. This is bad, right? Because the scan method is going to, as the name implies, is going to scan your complete dynamodb table. So if you are like Pinterest or Spotify or those guys, well, you're going to end up like scanning literally billions of items. So you want to use something different. You want to use query instead of a scan. But in both situations, I mean, you can always interrupt the call, and the results are going to be paginated anyway. Dynamo is not going to answer you with millions of items, so it's automatically paginated. But here, just to keep it simple, I kept it like this without pagination. Okay, so this was for handling the GET request. So now the important part is here, is how I handle the POST request. First, I create just 2 timestamps just to have like a, let's say, a randomized prefix for the images that I'm uploading. So here with Silex, I'm receiving the image. All right. Then this is the segment that allows me to create a thumbnail. So I'm creating a 200 pixel square image with Imagine. Nothing really fancy here. I'm uploading the original image of the user in Amazon S3. Then here I'm uploading the thumbnail. And once those uploads are finished, here I'm using dynamodb table. And I'm creating an item, as you can see, with the name of the user, the timestamp, the description, the name, the different links. And that's it, right? So nothing really complex. I run the application locally. It looks like this. So as you can see here, I'm on my own laptop. Just wanted to show you the dynamodb table. So I'm here. I'm exploring. So the table is empty now. So if I add an image, sorry. Okay, so this is a picture from last year's conference. Okay, and when I'm calling add, so Okay, so that's it. So the file is now uploaded on S3. And you see here, this is the item that I created. So you notice the two links to the S3 buckets. And now if I'm going back to Amazon S3, you will see also the image. So here I'm back in the console. So the two buckets where I uploaded the images are here. Okay, so here you see the reverse timestamp that I use to randomize the prefix of my images. Okay, but this is running locally, right? So notice that even if the application is running locally on my laptop, I'm still using the different API endpoints for S3 and dynamodb to get the resources. Now, the thing that I didn't mention that you need to do before uploading the application to Elastic Beanstalk is to give access to the application. Here the application is running locally, so it uses my own credentials that I have on my laptop, my own AWS credentials. But when you are going to deploy the application on Beanstalk or on any other web server, you are going to have to create credentials to access those applications. So if you've been yesterday in I think the Perils of the Cloud session, you already know what I'm going to do. So I'm going to create credentials. You absolutely need to do that. So for that, you need to go to your AWS IAM account. It's very simple. So I'm going to show you how to create the credentials. So going back to the console, I go here to Identity and Access Management. Is it okay for people in the back? Do you see the screen? Okay. So what I'm going to create is a role. A role is kind of access control rules that I'm going to give to an EC2 instance, not to a human person, right? So here I have a couple of roles that exist. So the policy is the document that is going to describe what a role can do. So first I'm creating the policy. And so you saw there's a different list of policies that are already maintained by Amazon, but here you want to create your own because, I mean, if you follow the security practices, the main principle in security is the least access privilege, right? You want to give an application or a user the least amount of privilege in order for him to do the work that is required. So here you see either you're going to copy, you can start from an existing policy or you can create your own based on JSON, or you can use the policy generator. That's what I'm going to use now in order to create your policy. So here, first you choose the service. So my application needs to have access to S3 and to DynamoDB. Okay, so I'm choosing here Amazon S3, and then what access do we give to the application? So this application definitely doesn't need to create, delete buckets and so on. This application only needs to put objects like this, put access control to the object. That is because we're putting images and this application is meant for people to see all the images. So the code is going to be able to change the access control list and to give the permissions to worldwide download. And you notice in my application, I didn't added a delete feature, right? But if I wanted this delete, so this the code should be able to delete an object. So I mean, you get the idea. You go here, you give the access to delete an object. And here, for the resource locator, you can even straight tighten down the rules and give the complete resource name of the bucket that you want to restrict. Okay, so then you add this statement. You do exactly the same with the DynamoDB. So with DynamoDB, this application should be able to not delete tables, definitely not create tables. This application should be able to get items and put items and do the query and the scan requests. That's pretty much it. Okay, so here I'm doing it a little bit dirty. The resource I said star. Definitely you don't want to add a star. You want to add the definite name of your of the table that you're going to use. And so that's it. This is the policy that you are going to add. So the policy is created. And now that you created a policy, you just need to create a role. So my new role. And this is the role that is going to be applied to your instances. Okay, so you check this one. So this is a role that is going to be applied to EC2 instances, so they can do anything on your behalf. So those are my policies, the one that I created right now. And that's pretty much it. Okay, now the role is created. So now when I'm going to create an environment on Beanstalk, I'm going to say all the instances that are going to be created by Beanstalk need to use this role for me to have access to those resources. Otherwise, the instances cannot do anything, right? And as you saw, I mean, the main point is you only give access to your instances to what they need to do. They only need access to those two services, nothing else. They don't need to create EC2 instances and create databases, nothing more. And as you saw, I mean, it's pretty easy to go back to the policy. If, for example, you are going to use a search engine, if you are going to use cloud search, it's very easy to go back to the policy and add additional roles into your application without you to do anything on the application itself, without touching the application, without even changing the code or embedding the credentials. The good thing on using IAM is that, as you saw in my code, here, I never said where are my credentials. Never. I never had to embed the role that I'm going to use, my credentials to IAM, nothing. This happens behind the scenes by the SDK. And when Beanstalk is going to create an EC2 instance, it's going to create temporary credentials with the policy that I have on IAM, embed the temporary credentials into the EC2 instance, and the SDK is going to create the roles and expose them to you. So this way you have a code that is completely clean and completely independent of the access control that you're going to give. I'm not putting any security feature in the code. It's directly controlled via IAM. Okay, so going back to the application, so this is the policy that we created. How much time do we have left? 10, 15 minutes? Okay. So since we still have time, let's create the deployment, right? So usually when I show you the application directly via that is running on my laptop, but let's create it on Beanstalk. It's very easy to do with the command line interface. So either you do it yourself manually on the web interface, like here. So this is the console. I already have the application running here. So it's P sharing demo, and you see I have one environment in this demo. So if you go to the environment, you see here the image that I also uploaded from my local laptop because they are both using the same table. So, so this demo environment is live. So if you go to this link, you should be able to see it on your phone, on your laptop. So feel free to upload an image. You should see exactly the same interface. So it's psharing-demo-dev.elasticbeanstalk.com. Okay, so try to upload an image while I'm creating a new Beanstalk environment. So this one exists, right? I created just before the session, but I'm going to show you now how to create it directly. So I'm opening a shell. So this is where I install my application. So the first requirement is to have everything under version control. So here I'm using Git, right? So everything is clean, everything is committed. So I'm going to do like eb init. So eb stands for Elastic Beanstalk. And so here I'm in interactive mode, so I'm creating a new application. So I'm going to call it phptour. phptour 2. Well, phptour. Let's see if it exists. Okay. So yes, I'm using PHP. And here, well, you can choose different versions. You can fine-tune this. Here I'm only interactive mode. You can adjust yourself which versions you want. So let's say that I'm using 5.5. Here you can choose if you want SSH access to your instances, because basically Beanstalk is just a wizard which is going to create resources for you, right? So what I recommend you is never SSH into instances, right? Because, I mean, if you need to SSH into your instance to do a deployment, it means that somehow your deployment process is bad, right? And there's many tools out there, like you can go to see the guys from Continuous PHP. Yesterday we had a great session on Ansible and so on. So there's many tools that allow you to do this remotely. You shouldn't SSH into instances. But because I'm doing the demo here, I'm going to show you how to do the SSH, right? So there's a couple of SSH keys that I have on my environment. I'm going to use the key number 2. That's pretty much it. So here the Elastic Beanstalk environment has been created. No EC2 instance is running for the moment. So if I go back to the console, you see here phptour has been created, but there is no environment that exists for this application. Okay? So I'm going to create an environment again via the command line interface. So it's I'm going to do like eb create. And I'm going to provide the what we created, the IAM role for this application. So the IAM role was here. So it's phptour-db-s3. Sorry. Okay, so I'm creating an environment, and all the instances in this environment are going to use this IAM role. And so this is going to be the environment name. So by default, I'm creating a dev environment. So I don't know if you guys in the back see it. So yeah, the default is phptour-dev. I'm going to use the same DNS prefix name. So that's it. The environment is creating. So now, because it's the first time I created the Elastic Beanstalk environment, Beanstalk created a zip file of my application, uploaded it, and you see that now the region is Ireland, so this is what I have by default in my configuration. It's using a 64-bit Linux AMI, and now the environment is creating. So you see that now it's safe to shut down the script, but by default it's going to continue to do the creation steps. So if you go back to the console, sorry, here, you see that my environment now is creating phptour-dev. It's launching, and here you see the details of what's happening now. So a load balancer has been created, a security group has been created, now auto-scaling is in creation process as well, and the next step will be to create the instances. Okay, so let's give him a couple of minutes just to start the instances. So this is the 3 steps that I did, and then every time you need to redeploy your application, the command line is pretty simple. Just eb deploy. It's going to take the latest changes you have on Git and push them to your environment, and that's pretty much it, right? So so at the end we're going to be with this app. So let me check if we are where we are, and if someone uploaded a picture. Yes. Okay. There's gonna, yeah, one thing important that I just mentioned before. Here, Beanstalk is creating the resources, but Beanstalk is not a black box again. Like you have complete access to everything that is being done. So if I go to my AWS account here, and I'm going to the EC2 instances, you're going to see the instances that have been created by Beanstalk. You see they are here. So this is the one that I've just been created. So the phptour dev is here. So the instance is running. There's just a couple of steps that are need to go through. So that you see like Beanstalk is now creating the log control, the CloudWatch alarms, and just in a matter of minutes, the complete environment is going to be created. I'm going to be able to SSH directly into my instances, or to do any kind of change in the application. Okay, just to make sure we have time for the questions, I just created this very simple application, but I didn't show you how to, for example, add a DNS name, so with a Route 53. Ideally, you want to also add like a content delivery network with a CloudFront is going to cache static content, but also dynamic content. We could also add like a search engine with Cloud Search, or like a service to send emails, to send notifications every time like a new picture has been uploaded and so on. There's also Elastic Transcoder, so we don't limit ourselves only to pictures or to videos. We can also transcode images. We can create animated GIFs from videos and so on. So my point here is that AWS is just like a set of building blocks for you to build any kind of application. And this is the way people build applications. So I remember when Pinterest started a couple of years ago. It's not a very old company now. I mean, they are what, like something like 4 years old, but they started exactly like this, right? Even smaller than this. They started with just 2 instances. Initially, they had 1 instance for the front end and another one with MySQL running there. But my point is, because you can only create resources that you need and you can delete them if you don't need them anymore, you can gradually add features and new services in your application by directly using your API. That is, I think the best image that I wanted you to have in mind is, for you, AWS is a programmable data center, and a programmable data center that you can control via the PHP SDK. So with that, I wanted to mention just a couple of resources. So there's a Twitter account for the PHP SDK. So you can follow the account to have the latest versions, the latest commits. Basically, you can be in touch with the AWS team that is creating the PHP SDK. They are pretty responsive. If you send a tweet to this account, starting at 4 p.m. in Europe, you can expect to have an answer very quickly. The team who is working on the PHP SDK is based in Seattle, so it's Pacific time. Otherwise, I show you already the GitHub repository for the SDK. So again, don't mess up with the branches. There's a couple of branches that are available out there, but if you go to the page of the SDK, you have a lot of resources, the API documentation. Basically, you have everything you need to get started with the SDK. And there's also a blog. So the blog is really interesting if you're doing anything complex with the SDK. It's pretty well maintained, and it's always touching different edge cases of the SDK with always examples of things you can do to enhance your application and so on. Again, the people who is writing the blog is the team who is maintaining the PHP SDK. So you can get in touch with them. They are pretty responsive. It's not like a huge team that is hidden somewhere. You can directly reach those guys. And if you're in Luxembourg, last point that I wanted to make, there's a meetup group that has been created just a couple of weeks ago, where we discuss different topics on AWS, and you will recognize the organizers who are from the local PHP community here. So again, if you want to get in touch with other developers on AWS here in Luxembourg, join the user group. So with that, thanks for your attention. We still have 5 minutes for questions. If you want the slides, they are already online. Go to bit.ly/phptour AWS. Basically, it's the exact same deck that I've been using. Thank you. Okay, so questions, perhaps? Yes, sorry. Oh, you can ask it in French, and I'll. Okay.
If you want to start with what you.
Yeah.
Is there any resources that are interesting to read or whatever?
Yeah. if you want to start, go to the, one thing important that I didn't make is that the simple environment that I created myself is, you can have it with a free account. It runs in the free tier. So if you go to the Amazon Web Services website and you go to the Elastic Beanstalk page, in Elastic Beanstalk, I wanted to show you the access to the documentation. So the documentation is pretty well done. And inside the developer guide here, you have a couple of examples already in PHP. So here you see building PHP applications with Elastic Beanstalk and Git. And there's a couple of examples already. So there's a Symfony 2 application, a Cake PHP application. There's a couple of other examples down in the documentation that show you how to deploy like a WordPress and so on. So I will start from here. I will take the example, I will follow how to deploy like a Symfony application, and then gradually I will add components. That's probably the best way to get started. Now, something that is really important with Beanstalk is, we didn't have time to discuss this, but because it was the topic of so many talks, I didn't want to go deep in this. You can, the way you develop with Beanstalk is you run exactly what I did. So I run the application locally. It runs in my local laptop, and then I do like EB deploy, and if it runs on my machine, it should run exactly the same on Beanstalk. Unless I deployed like local libraries that only exist in my machine and I didn't put that in Composer, but if you use like Composer with the requirement JSON script, it should run exactly the same. So the way you develop is something close to what people mention in the different talks on continuous integration and continuous deployment. You do it locally, and then you can push in your environment. Because here, I'm going back here to my Beanstalk console. You see, this is the dev environment. So I can create a production environment. I can create multiple dev environments to follow the different branches. So you can always push to different environments, and when you're done with those, well, you can just delete the environment itself. Everything is versioned and kept. So, sorry, just going back here. The application versions that I uploaded, you see, here's the first one. You can always re-download the application itself. You will see it's just like a simple zip file that contains everything that I created. We still have 2 minutes for another question. Yes?
So it's very nice when you create all of this, but you just said continuous testing or whatever. How do you test it? Because it actually relies on the Amazon services, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, okay. So that's a really good point. So the question was, how do you test this? Because it's relying on AWS, right? So if you test it, like for example, here my application is using DynamoDB and is using S3. So you need to be connected to have access to those points. So at least for DynamoDB, there's a solution that we support. So for S3, well, the S3 API is not that complex. So you can mimic S3 with, there's a couple of open source projects that you can get from GitHub that mimic S3 with the local file system, and basically you will have like everything stored locally. DynamoDB is perhaps more complex, but if you go to our website, you can download a static version. Well, not a static, a local version of DynamoDB, which is based on SQLite. And I just wanted to show this on the page because it's something that is not very well known. So if you go to the DynamoDB page, I think it should be here on the developer resources. Somewhere we have the local version of DynamoDB. So yeah. Yeah, so if you go to the documentation of DynamoDB, the developer guide, so you have at the end sorry. Okay, let me just, so you have basically a way to install DynamoDB, DynamoDB locally, here it is. And this application is going to expose the API endpoints of DynamoDB on your local laptop. Of course, it's not going to scale like DynamoDB because you're going to use like SQLite behind the scenes, and it's going to also have this, this shell that is going to help you to basically have a REPL for DynamoDB. Now, that's for Dynamo. The other services like Redshift and so on, you have to use the different SDKs. So use development resources for that.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Thanks everyone. I'll stick around. If you have any question, don't hesitate to get back to me, or otherwise just send me a message on Twitter. It's Carl Coase, or otherwise I think you will find my my contact on the event page. Thanks a lot, and don't hesitate to get back to me if you have any question. Cheers.